Hey, welcome back, friends. If you want to join the friends, go ahead and hit that subscribe button down below. So today we are going to tell you just exactly WTF is Golden God Swords. So there are four different types of Golden God Swords. There is the Ceradomin God Sword, the Armadillo God Sword, the Zamorak God Sword, and the God Sword. All four of these are gotten from the Balthazar's Big Raffle. They are identical to the regular God Sword, except that they have a golden, basically chroma to them. I think that's the best word to use for it. But they can be gathered any day or any Monday. You have to put your tickets in on Monday. That's when you're going to want to do it so that you can try to get at the Golden God Swords. So, if they're identical chromas of God Swords, what exactly are God Swords? Basically, God Swords are level 75 melee two-handed weapons. They are relatively good for AoE combat. I know that halberds are actually better, but God Swords are a decent option. And if you check the prices of them, most of them aren't that expensive, but the Ceradomin is about 14.5 million. Armadillo is about 3.5 million, and then the other two are about 1 million apiece. So they're not bad money wise. Let's go ahead and see why they're worth so much for a tier 75 though. So basically there's an option to either use an active or kind of like their old special ability. The Armadillo is kind of just a burst type of weapon. Bandos reduces the defense. Ceradomin heals you, and the Zamorak one stuns or freezes somebody. So the idea of these swords is they have that special ability. Obviously, they do cost a lot of adrenaline to use all these because, as you can probably tell from the effects, the special abilities would be completely overpowered if you didn't have to use quite a bit of adrenaline. So you're going to have to be using 50% of your adrenaline to use any of these special abilities. Or if you are on Legacy, it's a 50% of your special attack bar. So all in all, it's not horrible really to use, but they are pretty expensive. So it's not really worth using their special abilities if you're using adrenaline. So what they did to combat that was give them a passive effect. The Armadillo Godsword is basically completely useless. It increases your attack and strength by 1 level, but if you're already using overloads or super pots or something like that, it's basically a useless passive effect. So Armadillo Godsword, surprisingly, still 3.5 million. That's literally just because Legacy PKing. Going on to the Bandos Godsword, as you can see, that is actually the cheapest one at 835,000. The reason for that is that it only decreases the defense level of monsters. And honestly, if you're using a tier 75 to try to kill something, you probably don't care about things like affinity or anything like that. You're just trying to kill them as fast as you can for like a slayer task or something like that. You're not really doing any high level bossing with tier 75. So Bandos is literally just components, really. Ceradomin Godsword is probably going to be the best, so I'm going to save that for last. The Zamorak Godsword does have the freezing ability that's very good for PvP or Castle Wars or anything else that has PvP, because you can actually freeze your opponent. I think that the passive effect just is a chance of freezing them. It's very good for mages and rangers, it says, just because you need to stay in melee range of them. Again, though, if you're using this in PvP, odds are you're doing something wrong, seeing as how it's worth 1.2 million, and if you have the golden one, I don't even know what happens if you have the golden one and you die with it. I would imagine they would just get a regular one instead of the golden one. So it's definitely not worth using in PvP. So Zamorak Godsword, completely useless. Ceradomin is the one that we are going to be shooting for if we're trying to get the golden Godsword, though. Ceradomin, it heals the wielder, if that's not hard to say, by 3% of their maximum life points and recovers 3% of their maximum prayer points. Basically, what that means is, I believe it's a 25% chance of proccing. You basically have infinite prayer points, assuming that you are using abilities relatively quickly. So it's going to be extremely good for you lower level players that are trying to do slayer tasks or anything that you need a decent amount of food for. Basically, it is the equivalent of a soul split That's why Ceridome Godsword is actually worth 14.5 million, because it's extremely, extremely, extremely good for lower level to mid-level players. I say that, but it does require 75 attack. But if you don't have Soul Split yet, so I'm going to say a mid-level player, but you do have 75 attack, this is going to be your best way of sustaining during a Slayer task or any other thing that you usually would use food for. It basically eliminates the need for food altogether, which is extremely overpowered. Usually the way you would get that is by paying 14.5 million, but if you get it off the Balthazar's big raffle, it's going to be the best one that you could possibly get. Obviously, I am going to look over cosmetics really quick. So the golden Ceridome, that's going to be the one that heals you. Has little flanges on the side. It's not a bad looking one. It does have the Ceridome's hilt right here. So all in all, decent design. It obviously does have the golden kind of chroma to it. And as you can see, if you zoom in a little bit, you do get a decent amount of detail on it. So they did put a decent amount of detail onto all these God Swords. So it's a very good thing to make golden. The Armadillo is personally one of my least favorite. They just made it look kind of like a feather. It's understandable why they made it look like a feather, but it does make it look very big and bulky. It doesn't really look like a sword that you'd be able to wield with two hands. It looks more like a maul than anything. You'd just be swinging it around hoping to hit something. Obviously, it's a fantasy game, so there's not going to be any real weight to things, but I think they just made it look too heavy. It's kind of like the Buster Sword from Final Fantasy VII. You know how that thing is just massive? It's just unrealistic for somebody to be able to move that sword around. You would need like 150 strength to move this thing around, but yeah, it's a little bit bulky in my opinion, but I know some people really do like that look of the whole feathering. Zamorak is a really nice one in my opinion. It does have the little flanges on it again, but these are actually pointing downwards. Basically, they are... The idea of it would be that you would cut into a person. So I really like the vicious look of it. It even looks like you're accidentally cutting into yourself when you're wielding it like that. But yeah, I really do like the look of the Zamorak Godsword. It's probably one of my favorites. I'm not sure if Ceridome or Zamorak would be my favorite, but they're definitely the top two. And then Bandos, again, it looks extremely bulky. It's not my kind of look. Obviously, Bandos is supposed to be a little bit more of a strength-oriented boss, so it's understandable why they have it a little bit bulkier. At least it's not as big as the Armadillo, in my opinion. And it does have the little serratedness to it to make it kind of look a little bit smaller, where they would actually possibly have a little bit of thinner blades, whereas the Armadillo is just a massive feather. So this is a decent sword. I would not mind if I got the Golden Bandos God Sword, but honestly, I would be hoping to get the Zamorak, or obviously the Ceridome, just because it's the best. But just from cosmetic as well, I would like the Zamorak or Ceridome. So if you are interested in these, go ahead and put your tickets in on a Monday. There is only 2,500 of these available every single day, so be aware there's an extremely rare chance of getting this, but if you do, you're going to be one of the exclusive people that have a Golden God Sword. If you like this video, go ahead and hit that subscribe button down below, leave a like and a comment. As always, have a good one.